Hello, and welcome to Windows in Time, Wayward Girls of the Rogue Valley, presented by Jackson County Library Services and the Southern Oregon Historical Society. I am Leah Pastizo, Digital Services Specialist. This program is being recorded, so please mute your microphone and turn off your camera to ensure quality recording. There will be a time to answer your questions at the end of the program. Jackson County Library Services acknowledges that its libraries are located within the traditional lands of the Shasta, Takelma, and Lakgawa people, whose descendants are now identified as members of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, as well as of the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and Modoc Nation, who were forced to relocate to Oklahoma. We take this moment to recognize the Indigenous peoples whose traditional lands are where residents of Jackson County live today. JCLS is committed to fostering understanding, deep respect, and honor for Indigenous people, and we encourage you to learn more about the land you reside on. For more information, go to jcls.org/land. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Jackson County Library Services. And now here's Larry to introduce our presenter.
The next month, we will have the presentation Community Support 101 that the Carpenter family gave us by Alice Mullally. This is the story of one of the great philanthropies of Southern Oregon that has contributed in many, many ways, and is a fascinating tale that goes back all the way back to about 1910. But today we have Jan Wright. Jan Wright is one of our stable of really fine speakers that has spoken here on a number of occasions. She always has a fresh topic and always brings a lot of insight. Jan was raised in Alabama, did her undergraduate studies in Utah, at Utah State, as an advanced degree from Southern Oregon University. She was currently the executive director of the Talent Historical Society, and now she's the archivist at the Southern Oregon Historical Society. So all of the research that goes into so many of these talks, in one way or another, involves Jan Wright. She's particularly interested in the social and cultural patterns of the 19th century, and her book on John Beeson is a classic, and she's also written the Acadia book on talent. Her talk today is Wayward Girls of the Rogue Valley, and with that, I'll bring over Jan.
Okay, great. I'm a little bit nervous today because I confess I'm one of those wayward girls. I used to run around with a bumper sticker on the back of my car that said, "Well-behaved women seldom make history." And that's kind of true. And I'm proving that today because the only women we talk about are the ones that have fallen. I had this interest in this topic for a long time but for the grace of God, so and I know that girls have a lot of spunk and a lot of inner strength that they don't get to express all the time because of the cultural norms that society puts on them. Same with boys, but we're talking about girls today. And I had a little slideshow up here for the first people that came in, just showing different pictures of girls in all walks of life, not necessarily wayward ones, but and I don't know exactly how to define wayward, because I think it changes over time, and things that my grandkids do today would have been, they would have been sent to reform school for sure back in the 1880s or 1870s. But over time, things changed. In Jackson County in particular, I want to focus on local and national treatment of women, young girls, mostly teenagers. In 1877, the Democratic Times, which was a local paper in Jacksonville, said, cautioned the parents. At first, they cautioned the parents to have a happy home environment and to focus more on making the children happy than on buying new furniture for their homes or that sort of thing. That the material things didn't matter as much as the welfare of their kids. It also just a little bit of shame and was placed in this article that saying, you know, if you're bad parents, you're going to get bad kids, which is not always true. In 1878, I love this article. Sarah Spencer was a suffragette. She wrote in the New Northwest, which was a women's magazine, newspaper in Oregon, edited by Abigail Scott Fenway. And she was livid because they had spent 7 years trying to get Congress to pass a bill to stop trafficking women and children. And in her opinion, the congressman had no interest in doing so because they participated. They liked to wine and dine and cast aside the women after they were the girls, after they were done with them. So it took 7 years for them to be shamed into passing the bill. They would bring it to Congress, and Congress would, delay or postpone and not vote for it, decline it, and turn it in again. And so she was excited because they finally recognized that when a girl got in trouble or was cast out of her home for being naughty, she had no place to go but jail. And in the jail, she got equally as abused that she did if she lived on the streets. So they were trying to provide for them like they did for boys. When boys got into trouble, they actually put them in reform schools, and I'm not saying they were any better, but they taught them a trade, tried to get them employed so that they could be productive human beings. The women, when they got into trouble on the streets, they either had babies or abortions or just died within a number of years of tuberculosis or some other disease. And there was no shelter for them. There was no place for them to go or a trade to learn other than prostitution. And that's 1878. 1882, a girl under the age of 14 wrote in the Times that girls her age knew way more than their parents knew. And that children today do know things that their good mothers are quite innocent of. And the paper goes on to say, instead of asking for kisses, these girls should get spankings. And that they were too focused on boys, even before they were wearing long dresses. So that's 1882. 1903, in the Oregonian, a woman wrote, another suffragette, who said, I'm a suffragette now, forever, world without end. And she was angry because during the Christmas season, when everybody has all goodwill and good cheer, they put on programs and brought gifts to the men in the penitentiary. And they didn't think about the girls. And so she was trying to get them to open their minds to entertaining the young women that were in an institutionalized setting and give them some gifts and help them along and show them that somebody cared about them. We're going to talk about the way that usually Wayward girls were handled. This is the parents of Maddie Sicily. Every story that you could tell begins with the parents. So I agree with that first comment. This is Louis Sicily and Martha Culver. They got married under circumstances that were not that great, because Hiram Culver, Martha Culver's father, was opposed to the marriage. When Martha got married, he went hunting. He put his rifle over his shoulder and walked up Wagner Creek and refused to attend the wedding because Louis Sicily had the reputation of being a sporty man, and he was a very good dancer and popular with the girls. So Martha fell for him, and Hiram was not happy about it. And Hiram died a year later, so he didn't see the rest of the story. The rest of the story is Maddie. Maddie was born the last child of Martha and Louis. And 8 days after she was born, her mother died. So Louis sent her here to the Rogue Valley. They came from here, but then they lived in Baker. They came to the Rogue Valley and they dropped off Maddie and her brother with a family here in the valley. Martha Culver's sister. And Maddie grew up going to school in Jacksonville, and by the age 16, she found herself pregnant. Now, this is what usually happens with wayward girls. This is the boy, Fred Whipple, that she claimed was the father. So Maddie claimed that Fred was the father, and Louis Sicily paid Fred $5,000, according to one letter that I read, to marry her. Fred was only 16. He was the son of Henry Clipple and Elizabeth Clipple, and Henry Clipple was a big wig in Jacksonville. He was the county clerk. He was the county sheriff for a while. He was the recorder for the city of Jacksonville. He put on the exhibit, the 1892 exhibit at the World's Fair for the state of Oregon. But he didn't say a word about this marriage. He left that to his wife, Elizabeth, and this is Elizabeth Clipple. And she was so opposed to the marriage that Maddie and Fred got a divorce just months after the baby was born. And she was, I don't know, 3 or 4 months pregnant when she got married. The gossip, and this is gossip, it's not history, though it was written down, that when she went to the wedding, she wore white, and she had a lace, kind of an apron thing over the front of her dress, and she kind of lifted it up for Fred and said, "See how much I'm growing?" And was kind of presented as a really brazen girl. When you look at her, she doesn't look that bad. And this picture also, I noticed, she has a wedding ring on her finger. So she was proud that she was married. She wanted the world to know that she had solved the problem. She had been, the pregnancy was not, she was not going to hide. She had nowhere to go for one reason. And so she agreed with the solution of getting married. But Elizabeth, the mother of Fred, said, "I'm not having it." And so in the papers, there was this nasty exposure of all of the things that had happened between Fred and Maddie because the mother opposed the marriage. She said, it's not a legitimate marriage. I never consented to him getting married, and he's underage. He's only 16. So I want it annulled. And it did become annulled, and Maddie got custody of the child. And here's the baby. She took that baby down to Britt's studio, laid him on a pillow proudly, and had his picture taken. And his name was Fred Flipple, same as her father. And she had that baby for 9 years, and then he died. In the meantime, Maddie got married again, and Maddie became a very upright citizen. She married a guy named William Coleman, and William Coleman became the county clerk here in the county. He took over Klippel's job and was very respectable up to a point. That's a whole story too. But she had several boys, and of that marriage, after Fred died, the baby died, and lived throughout her life here. Even though there was a lot of gossip about her and a lot of scandalous stuff, she kind of overcame it, and she became Mrs. Coleman, and nobody remembered this Maddie Sicily stuff. The next case study is, this is what really, what really led me to speak about this, because this letter spoke to me. At the Southern Oregon Historical Society, there's a whole collection of letters from the Hudson family. And there's 3 boxes of these letters. And when I worked there years ago, I got to accession these boxes and go through them. And oh boy, did they capture my attention. You see this paper, it's all crumply. It looks torn out of a ledger book. It's not stationary. And it just says, my dear. She doesn't say mother. But Sadie wrote this letter, and she said, Mama, if you do not take me out of here by the 2nd of June, I will run away. Mark my words, and you will never see me again. You don't know what kind of place this is. And what place are we talking about? We're talking about the Magdalene House in East Portland. Sadie Hudson wrote many letters from Magdalene House that her mother saved. And these letters were in that collection that I was accessioning into our collection at SOHS. Just to give you a flavor of some of the things that Sadie went through when she was in Magdalene House, and that name denotes that it was a Catholic charity. At that time, the state had no official institutionalized place for girls. They did for boys, and they had the penitentiary, and they had the insane asylum, and they had other things, but they didn't have a place to reform girls. So they sent them to the Catholics to reform them. Sadie happened to be a baptized Catholic girl. The rest of her family were not so much, but Sadie was baptized when she was younger and could claim to be a Catholic. She rode up to Cortland. Let's see, where is that? With this guy. He took her. This is her uncle, Uncle Hull, Dick Hull. And he took her to Portland and wrote a letter to Emmeline, which said, "Oh my gosh, I'll never, ever do that again. She was sassy. She was terrible. She flirted with everybody on the train. She took a man's hat and sat on it. She humiliated and mortified me. And I will never do that again in my life. And I'm so glad I'm not having any more children." Maddie's version of that story is a little different. She said, "I had a very pleasant trip and of course had lots of fun on the train. Uncle didn't take me anywhere when we arrived in Portland, although I was just as well satisfied as I am very tired and sleepy. The poor sisters had a very unpleasant time of it," whatever that means. "There are 10 sisters in our all here, and I like them very much. They have changed my name to Corona," whatever that means, virus, I guess. "And I just hate it. The sisters treat me like I'm a little bit of a kid instead of what I am." She was 13. "I was very lonesome when I first came. I want a corset and some stuff to make towels or money to buy some. We have a very large, nice building. There are some other girls here besides myself and an invalid lady. So you see, there's not a great many inmates. I will remain here with love to all of you, and I am forever your daughter." So she gives a little bit of a different spin on it. And later on, she says, "I don't know why Uncle Dick lied about the trip, because she found out that her mother knew what she had done on the train, being incorrigible for poor Uncle Dick. But she's always asking about Uncle Dick and Aunt Sarah because they live in Astoria, which is closer to Portland than Southern Oregon. She said, let's see, "You can't imagine the lie he told when he brought me here. He said he and Aunt both were Catholics and that they go to church every Sunday, regular. I would like to know what good it does for him to tell lies and such as that. It must do him lots of good. All the holes are liars anyway." So, you don't know which is true. But as remembering back when I was a young girl and was 13 and had a different perspective on what was good and what was bad, and saying they were Catholics was a lie, but he's trying to make good with the sisters and the mother, quote unquote, mother of the institution. And Sadie is constantly in her letters asking for shoes, clothing, just the simple necessities that she needs, because her mother has to pay $8 a month for Sadie to live there. That's how the Magdalene House ran the institution, was by charging the inmates if they could pay. And sometimes Sadie's mom was late, and so the sisters would encourage Sadie to write to her mother and say, "Where's the money?" And Sadie became so enthralled at one point, brief point, she decided to become a nun herself. And that only lasted a couple of days, but she went in and out. She had a very vigorous routine. She had to get up at 6 o'clock and go to prayers before she could eat breakfast. she worked in the laundry, and when she handled the mangle, they called it, it was a wringer that did the laundry, her hand got caught in it, and she lost 3 of her fingers during that time that she stayed at the thing. But she managed to keep writing letters. I guess the fingers were on the hand that she didn't use too much. And she had 2 operations on her hand to amputate the fingers and that sort of thing. And then after that accident, they put her in charge of the mangle at the laundry. And she's 13 years old. So she's doing laundry for probably the whole household, trying to earn her keep at the institution. And she goes off and on in her letters saying, you know, I like it here. I could see myself staying here forever. To Mama, come and get me. You don't know what kind of place this is. And that just tugged at my heart. When I was 14, my dad died, and I was living with my dad, and I got shipped up to Idaho to live, and with my aunt and uncle. And it was not a pleasant experience, and you don't know what kind of place that was. So that tugged at my heart when I heard Sadie say, you don't know what kind of place this is. She was tired of being there. Sadie stayed there for 3 years. And let's see. This is a picture probably of Sadie with her mother, Emmeline. And Emmeline had 9 children, most of which died. 7 of them died before Sadie did. Sadie and Benjamin were the only 2 left when Sadie went into the institution. Well, and Olive. And we'll talk about Olive too. Sadie sent constantly in this collection of letters and things were dozens of these cards from the Magdalene House. All these religious messages. Some of them were in German, not English. They all had Madonnas and baby Jesus and all these things on them to remind, to show that Sadie was under a constant barrage of be good, trust Jesus. You will be reformed if you just be good. And at home, I imagine Sadie saw this hanging on the wall. This was from their house. And this is, let's see if I can find that. This is a picture of an old maid. And this conflicts with the religious training that she's getting. This says, if you spend your youth flirting and teasing and being coy and wasting your life away without getting a man, when you're old, which means, 20, something like that, you will become ugly. You'll have that X on your cheek that marks you, and your shadow of an old woman will follow you everywhere because you didn't get married and you wasted your time flirting frivolously. So she got a lot of mixed messages, and she had, I'm sure, a lot of hormones too. This is what is this? I can't get to it now. Okay, this, why is that like that? It's not supposed to be that way. Okay, never mind. So Sadie wrote that first letter, come and get me. If you don't come and get me by June 2nd, I'm going to run away. I've had it. Presumably, Emmeline, her mother, didn't hear from her for months. And this letter, I know you can't read it, is in October. The letter before was April of that same year, 1894. Sadie had been there for 3 years. She said, I suppose you'll be surprised to hear from me in October. I'm married. And she married a guy named Jack Sutton. He made $95 a month. And she was living in Portland. They were planning to get a summer cottage. And she said, I'm sorry I didn't tell you what my intentions were to get married. And who knows how she met this guy, or at the, she said she was working in a store as a sales clerk. How she got a job with no shoes and no clothes, I don't know, but she did it. So Sadie was resourceful and kind of canny. Well, Sadie decided that Jack Sutton wasn't the best of husbands. She went all over the world with him. She went to Chicago. She went to China. She went to Manila. She went to Hong Kong. She went to Canada. She write all these letters to her mom from all these exotic places that I'm sure when she was sitting in the Magdalene house, she never dreamed of going to. And Jack Sutton apparently had enough money and the kind of job that traveled a lot. He was also gone a lot. And during one of those absences, she met another man. And his name was Eugene Bissell. Eugene Bissell is a character in and of himself. And this shows a picture of Sadie and Eugene. She divorced Jack after she wrote a letter to her mother telling her that she was going to marry a very rich man, and that he had been in love with her for over a year, but dumb old Jack wouldn't give her a divorce. And then finally, when he did give her a divorce, she was married within a couple of weeks. And when she got married to Eugene, he was a captain in the, I don't know, army or something, and he was assigned to the Philippines. So she went with him. There's another famous person in Jacksonville, Alice Applegate Sargent, who also followed her man to the Philippines and different places in the military. Not the same as Sadie, but Sadie continued to write these loving letters to her mother and to give her mother money where her mother hadn't really kind of neglected her when she got to the Magdalene house. She constantly wrote when she was in the Magdalene house, Mother, why don't you write me? I've written you 5 letters and you've only answered 1. Where's the money that you're supposed to give the sisters? I'm tired of asking them for money, and they have other things to worry about. I want you to send me the money for shoes or to take care of me. Mother, do you love me? And all of those letters, we don't know what Emmeline replied. Those letters were not saved. Emmeline saved all of Sadie's letters. Well, for some reason, this Eugene Bissell guy, when she married him, he had been married and divorced as well, was from Brooklyn, New York, had lots of money, supposedly, but he was kind of hiding that money because in his previous divorce, the woman was trying to take him for all he had. And so he kind of put it in a trust or gave it to his children or his father to kind of spread it out so that the law couldn't get to it. He loved Sadie. He was crazy about her. And he invented a new name for Sadie. He called her Eleanor for some reason. I don't know why, unless that was her middle name. I don't know. But Sadie was kind of an obsession for him. And when I think so they were in Chicago, Sadie got sick. Sadie got deathly sick. And these two telegrams to Emmeline, the mother, tell of her condition. Eleanor, critically ill, practically hopeless. And then the second one, Eleanor passed away. May God comfort you. And I think what happened, well, she got pneumonia and is buried in Chicago, not out here. And there's a whole story about what happened to the Eugene Bissell. Eugene Bissell, this is Sadie. I finally found a picture of her. It's from the newspaper, so it looks kind of grainy. But the reason I have this picture is because this is the picture that he left in his hotel room when he killed himself. He couldn't stand living without Sadie. And he let everybody know that. And he died in San Francisco in a hotel, big fancy hotel. He turned the gas on, shut the doors, and died in his sleep with this picture beside his bed. And so it was such a sensational story that the newspaper found this picture and published it in the paper as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a picture of Sadie. She did talk about in her letters sending pictures to her mom over the years, but those pictures did not survive with the collection of letters. So that's the story of Sadie. There's a lot more to it. Sadie's sisters had troubles too, but we are going to move on to the arsonist. This is a picture of a schoolhouse as near the place that we're talking about as I could find. This is a picture of the table of a schoolhouse near Table Rock. But the school that in question was in a place called, probably never heard of it, Asbestos. It's north of Sam's Valley, past Beagle, never heard of that either probably, and then up to Asbestos. And yes, it's named after asbestos. And apparently there's a vein of that rock or mineral or whatever it is that exists up there that they were mining for a certain period of time. And so they named the town Asbestos. It doesn't exist anymore. Probably everybody died of cancer. But the schoolhouse that Ida was going to, let's see if I have yeah, I do. So in 1897, it lists Ida Greiner as one of the pupils at that school. You can see her name maybe down there. There were 7 kids enrolled in school. So not very populous school, not very many friends. And there's a couple of girls there that are around her age, but Ida didn't really fit in. Ida was the adopted daughter of Henry and Susan Greiner. And Henry seems to be really old on the census record in 1880 to be her actual dad. He's like in his 50s. And she's like 11 years old or something. So it just seemed like it was kind of, there's a big age gap there. We'll come to find out an adopted daughter. She lived with that adopted status for a long time. And whoops, why is this keep doing? This letter was also not in the Hudson collection, but in a different collection at SOHS. And it names Ida as the girl burned down the schoolhouse that she attended in Asbestos. And this letter is written to the superintendent of schools, Patrick Daly, in 1903. And she said, you know, I'm not trying to say that I'm an authority and it hasn't been investigated yet, but I do want to tell you what the circumstances that I witnessed are. And so she goes on, Mrs. Gardner goes on in this letter to say that Ida Greiner was spotted near the schoolhouse at the time of the burning, and that her footprints and horse prints, she was on horseback, were everywhere. That first thing Ida did was she visited the post office, which apparently was very close, the Asbestos post office, which was very close to the schoolhouse. And she talked to Mr. Mitchell, who was the postmaster there for a period of time, and then left about 9:30. And at 9:30, she came back and said, the school's on fire, and to the postmaster. So the postmaster went to go inspect the school, and sure enough, it burned to the ground, but it was missing the bell. So Sadie shows up with the bell somehow. And when asked why she had the bell to the schoolhouse, she said, oh, I saw it. It was laying in the woods, and I saw it there, so I took it for safekeeping. So it all sounds a little off, and Mrs. Gardner wants Ina investigated. And Ina does go to reform school. And at that time in 1903, by 1903, there was a different place. It wasn't the Magdalene House anymore. It was another place, though it's still Catholic oriented. It was called the Sisters Academy or something like that. And she actually got arrested. She was maybe 14, something like that. And she was sent to, after a trial and $500 bail and all these proceedings against her, it was concluded by the county, which now the government is taking over these, instead of families placing people in, sending them off or absorbing them or getting married or anything like that. The county government itself is taking care of these issues. And they sent her to a lady named Laura Nichols, was paid $47.50 to take her up to Portland to by the county to go to this school. She was sentenced, that word came in, for 3 years in the girls to reform herself. And Mrs. Gardner was so happy because in her letter, she calls Ida morally depraved and not fit to live in the community. She was scared because she had property there. And she said so. She said, I have property here. I have to protect myself from this 14-year-old girl. And so she was sent away, and school proceeded the next year as usual. I don't know, the Asbestos was so remote, so far away that it was reported in the paper when it burned and that Ida was being sent, but it didn't say who was next and who, if they built another school or if they just had school in the post office. We don't know. But Ida's father, adopted father, Henry, had really tender feelings toward her, or protective ones. I'm not sure exactly, but the next year, just 9 months later, it's reported in the paper that Henry Greiner went into Jacksonville pleading with the county officials to bring her back home. And they did.
And Ida got married shortly after that. She was only 15. She married a boy that was in his late teens as well. And, you know, had a couple of kids and died. Is buried in the Antioch Cemetery. Her death certificate, though, is the real kicker. On her death certificate, you know, where it says parents and stuff like that, she gives the person who informed for the death certificate, probably her husband, said that her last name was Salner, Salner. And the little note at the bottom of the page says, Ida was stolen from her parents in Tennessee when she was young. Well, I was astonished at that. They said she was adopted and she was given the last name of Greiner. But so I looked back in the paper, and in 1892, I saw this little clip that said, Henry Greiner and his wife have returned from Tennessee. That must have been when they brought Ida back to the Rogue Valley. And so this gives me kind of sympathy, understanding about maybe Ida had a few mental problems about being stolen from her parents, because obviously she told somebody. She told her husband or the informant for the thing. That's how it went down, that she didn't really necessarily consent to being adopted, that she was brought here. Well, a few years ago, Ben Truey, who works at the library with me, had a big conversation. A descendant of the Greiner family started corresponding through email with Ben, and they knew nothing about Ida. They had never heard of her. They had this whole family history that included, you know, Henry's first divorce. And it turned out that Henry was married to a woman named Phoebe first, and Phoebe was had two children. One of them was named Ida, and one of them was named Marcellus. But Ida had the middle name of Lucinda, and Ida Greiner, who burned the schoolhouse, was Ida Lee. Different person entirely, same name, and the family wrote this big history about visiting Henry and Susan Greiner. Susan was Phoebe's sister, by the way. So he just dropped, you know, married one sister, divorced her, and then married the sister. Anyway, what was I going to say about that? So Ida Lee has this whole history that I don't know. I don't know. I looked in Tennessee under Salner, couldn't find anything. I don't know what happened, but she was stolen, according to her death certificate, from Tennessee, which gives you kind of a different take on Ida. Other girls in, this is a picture of Main Street in Medford. And on the, this side, is that my left one? The left side, where it says rooms, restaurant and rooms, that's the Royal House or Royal Restaurant, Royal Boarding House. That place has, if you went to Ben Truey's Windows in Time talk about the seedy side of Medford, this is where another story of a wayward girl takes place. Many wayward girls. apparently there was more than rooms and meals at this boarding house, and that it was it got busted many times for being a bawdy house or a place where lewd things were going on. Mrs. Hanscom, Lydia Hanscom, had many children, I think about 11 children. And she was married to Horace Hanscom, who lived for a while in Talent. And they got a divorce. It was a pretty nasty divorce. And after the divorce, Lydia married a guy named Mike Spanos. And Mike Spanos, apparently, was being sent to prison for murdering another Greek guy. But they lived at this boarding house. And Lydia introduced her daughters, Myrtle and Lily, to some other Greeks and some other problems that were going on. And so that's the location, and it's still there. That building, it doesn't look like that anymore, but it's still there. And so what I'm trying to say is that when people are wayward, there's always a story behind it. And in 2019, there was a study done, which I thought summarized really well the thing about girls. There was a study done on the difference between boys and girls and their delinquency. And boys in this study were way more likely to commit criminal offenses than girls. But girls were more likely to run away. And that when the girls' behavior was more affected by their home life than the boys, and that oftentimes they were running away from sexual abuse or physical abuse or some other kind of thing like that, and needed shelter more than they needed reform. They needed a safe place to be. And that the boys could tolerate more reform kinds of activities and be successful at it. But that girls needed a particular kind of care that didn't work as well with the boys. And society has stepped up. Society has offered. There was a list in 1918, Oregon finally built a reform school for girls in Portland. There was a big picture of it. I don't think I have it, no. And this reform school was not to punish them. It wasn't a penitentiary. It wasn't a punishing thing. It was more of a shelter than anything else. And they wanted to teach the girls to some skills, which they needed when they got out. Sadie, when she got out, she just got married and divorced and ran and continued to run around. She didn't have guidance other than the little Catholic cards that said "be good." She didn't have the skill to really face the world, though she did well. She married money, but she didn't have a really super toolkit to be able to function in the world after she got out of Magdalen House. So, any questions about? Yes. Well, I couldn't find anything. She told her mom she'd be obedient, you know, and be a good girl if she was sent home. But that's about all I could see. There was that she was just sassy and not very, didn't conform very well. Yeah. 1910s, something. Yeah. Are there any online questions?
Not so far.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.